Hello, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss important issues appearing in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 3rd June 2019. The news to be discussed has been presented on the screen, and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So, let's start our today's discussion. Now, the first news appears in the editorial section. It says, Slowdown confirmed. With the economic crisis deepening, the government will have to hasten reforms. Now, this topic in your prelims examination becomes a part of economy, and your mains gets covered under GS paper 3 under various issues relating to Indian economy. Now, this editorial highlights certain concerns in the Indian economy, especially with respect to the slowdown. And it also provides certain possible solutions which the new government must take while presenting its new budget. So, in this editorial, let us understand about the certain concerns as well as about the possible solutions. Now, as per the recent data released by the Government of India, it has highlighted that GDP has fallen to 5.8% in the fourth quarter of 2018-19. And this decrease of GDP in the fourth quarter has effectively brought down or decreased the overall growth of fiscal year 2018-19 to 6.8%. Further, slowdown can also be confirmed from the fact that growth in gross value added, that is GVA, has fell to 6.6% in 2018-19. Now, GVA here implies GDP minus taxes and subsidies. Now, slowdown in growth can also be understood from the fact that even rural economy remained in distress, as there was only 2.9% growth in the Indian agriculture. So all these data points to a slowdown in the Indian economy. Now all these data are not important for you to remember. However, the trends in the Indian economy becomes important with respect to last 5 years. These are the 8 core industries and this number represents their weightage. Now as you can see, the core industries are coal, crude oil, natural gas, refinery products, fertilizers, steel, cement, and electricity. And based on their weightage, the top 3 core industries are refinery products. As you can see, its weightage is 28.04, electricity as its weightage is 19.85, and steel as its weightage is 17.92. And the lowest weightage among the core industries is that of fertilizers, which is 2.63. So these are some of the basic facts with respect to 8 core industries. So this news highlights that growth in core industries have slowed down to 2.6% in April 2019 as compared to 4.7% in April 2018. Now as per the report of the government, joblessness is at a 45-year high at 6.1% in 2017-18. Another important aspect highlighted in its editorial is that the economy is also experiencing consumption slowdown. And this slowdown in consumption can also be seen from the fact that there is a fall in sales of automobiles, consumer products, consumer durables, and also FMCG, that is fast moving consumer goods. Further, economy is also impacted by low farm incomes, stagnating exports, as well as crisis in the financial sector, which includes rising NPAs of banks and also problems with respect to the NBFCs. Now, another important aspect highlighted in this editorial is that even the private investment is not taking place in the Indian economy. So these are some of the concerns which have been highlighted in this particular editorial, specifically with respect to distress in rural economy, consumption slowdown, as highlighted through fall in sales in automobiles, consumer durables, FMCGs, that is fast moving consumer goods, as well as low farm incomes, stagnating exports, and also crisis in financial sector. And also there is a lack of private investment. As all these can be reflected in the GDP of the fourth quarter, which has come down to 5.8%. And this has brought down the overall growth to 6.8%, which is a 5-year low. So given the possible concerns in the Indian economy, let us also see what are the possible solutions as highlighted in this particular editorial. Now with respect to possible solutions, there is a need to boost consumption in the market in the near term. And this can be done by putting money in the hands of the people by reducing income tax rates. However, this will not be an easy decision as it will increase government's fiscal deficit. Now, reducing income tax will affect government's revenue. And we know fiscal deficit is the difference between total revenue and total expenditure of the government. Now, if total revenue is decreased, then it will impact total expenditure and it will give rise to more borrowing by the government of India. As fiscal deficit highlights total borrowings needed by any government. Another important point to be noted is that while calculating total revenue, borrowings is not included. Now, despite the fact that reducing income tax may increase the fiscal deficit of the government, however, this will also spur growth as it will add more money in the hands of the people and this will effectively improve consumption expenditure in the economy. Or people will end up spending more in the Indian economy, which will effectively increase the demand in the Indian economy. Now, if the government reduces tax, then it might has to look for other alternatives of revenue, such as disinvestment. Further, the editorial highlights that in medium term, the government must ensure an increase in private investment in the economy by the following: by reforming the present land acquisition process, by reforming the existing labor laws in India, by reducing corporate tax, and also by providing steps to solve the financial crisis affecting banks and financial institutions. Now, steps to solve financial crisis also includes recapitalization of banks, that is, infusing banks with more liquidity. Now, the government of India had announced recapitalization of public sector banks to the tune of rupees 2.11 lakh crore in October 2017. And this recapitalization was to be done by infusion of capital by the government, that is, infusion of money by the government, and by raising money for the banks from the market. So, the government of India in October 2017 has already announced for the recapitalization of public sector banks. So, given this backdrop, the market is hoping that the budget presented by the new government will provide a boost to the Indian economy. So, in this aspect, let us wait for the budget to be presented in the parliament and then we'll understand that how it presents the future financial roadmap of the economy to steer away from the present slowdown. Thus, this particular editorial, which highlights the concerns on Indian economy and also provides for certain possible solutions, becomes extremely important from our examination perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. Now, the next article also appears on page number 10, and this article also refers to economic slowdown and the future steps which the government of India must take in order to revive the economy. As you can see, it highlights that the new government led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi must devote itself to a well thought out strategy for economic reforms. So, in this aspect, this article has highlighted certain missteps which, according to the author, the government took in the last 5 years, and also the article provides for certain key areas which the government must renew its focus on in order to provide for economic reforms. So, this article in your prelims examination becomes important from your Indian economic perspective, and your mains it gets covered under GS paper 3, specifically under Indian economy and inclusive growth and issues arising from it. Now, in the previous editorial, we have already discussed about the concerns highlighted with respect to Indian economy and also with respect to certain possible solutions. So, this present article also talks in the same direction. First of all, let's go through the missteps which, according to this article, the government took in the last 5 years. Now, the first misstep which this article highlights is with respect to demonetization, as demonetization led to loss of jobs mainly in the unorganized sector. The second misstep the article mentions is with respect to abandoning of Make in India policy by the end of 2015. So, this article further highlights that the government must renew its focus and start this concept of Make in India again. Another misstep, as highlighted, is with respect to poorly designed and rollout of the goods and services tax, as goods and services tax initially impacted most of the people in the informal sector. Another misstep highlighted is that problems of financial sector received little policy attention by the previous government. So on this note, the article also suggests that the present government must focus vigorously on solving the financial crisis. Another aspect highlighted is with respect to lack of financial reforms in the last few years. And these last few years also include the previous years led by Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was the Prime Minister of India. And the last misstep, as highlighted in this article, is with respect to the Constitution amendment to provide 10% reservation to the members of economically weaker section of the society. So these are some of the missteps which have been highlighted in this article. Further, the article also highlights about the renewed focus of the government which it must provide on certain key areas of the Indian economy. Let's go through those areas. So this article says that renewed focus must be provided to poor's access to income enhancing skills, education, health, as well as job opportunities. So on all these aspects with respect to enhancing skills of a person, education, health and job opportunities must be looked vigorously by the government. Now another important aspect highlighted in this article is with respect to revival of Make in India plan, as we have already discussed. As revival of Make in India plan will not only boost growth but will also help in providing employment opportunities to millions across the country. Now this article further mentions to make production less capital intensive. And it says that by making an industry less capital intensive will create more organized sector jobs. Now in order to understand this concept, let us first of all understand about capital intensive industries. Now capital intensive industries are such industries which require large amount of investment in order to produce a good or service and therefore have a high percentage of fixed assets. Now fixed assets here refers to property, plant and equipment. Now these capital intensive industries requires high volume of production in order to give adequate returns or adequate profit. Now some of the example of capital intensive industries are automobile industry, oil and refineries, transport sector including road, rail and air, steel production, etc. So these are the industries such as automobile, oil and refineries, transport and steel production which requires large amount of investment in order to produce a good or a service and therefore have a high percentage of fixed assets because they will be requiring fixed property, a fixed plant or a fixed industry as well as certain fixed equipments to operate. So on this note, the article highlights that the government must make the production less capital intensive as it will create more organized sector jobs. And more organized sector jobs or more jobs in the organized sector will also improve bargaining power of the employees as they will be able to form trade unions. Now another important point to be noted about capital intensive industries is that they are more vulnerable to economic slowdown as they still have to pay the fixed cost with respect to property and plant even though in times of recession or even though when there is less production. So this article highlights that there is not only a need to make industries less capital intensive but also to bring labor reforms along with land reforms as well as financial sector reforms. The article further mentions that the government should not provide subsidies or incentives to industrialists or the government should refrain from providing cheap loan to these industries. And rather the government must focus on the MSME sector, that is the micro, small and medium enterprises. And these MSME sector must be provided with easy credit as well as tax concessions. Further, even GST compliance for these industries should be made easy. Now the article favors for providing easy credit, tax concessions and easy GST compliance to the MSME sector as it will not only help in spurring growth of this sector but will also provide or will also improve production and revenue for the government. So these are the aspects highlighted in this article with respect to MSME sector. Further, the article says that the government must also focus on improving the credibility of data collected by the newly created National Statistical Office. Now, as you know, the government has merged the Central Statistics Office and National Sample Survey Office to create National Statistical Office on the recommendation of Rangarajan Committee. However, the government has not provided clearly whether the National Statistics Commission has a jurisdiction over the National Statistics Office. And hence the critics are saying that the data collected by National Statistics Office may have certain political interference. So in this respect, the article highlights that the government must clearly provide for jurisdictions of National Statistics Commissions over the National Statistic Office. So these are the renewed focus which the government must take as provided in this particular article. So after going through the first two discussions, this forms your means practice question for the day. It says, enumerate the steps which the government of India must take in order to steer the Indian economy out of the current slowdown. I hope after the first two discussions, you will be able to attempt this particular question. So we understand that this article as well as the previous editorial highlights in details about the concerns with respect to slowdown in the Indian economy and also provides for possible solutions and also the key areas which the government must highlight or focus in order to provide structural reforms. So after this discussion, let's move on to our next news analysis. Now the next news to be discussed appears on page number 11 as data point. It says how health workers are unevenly distributed. So this data point basically points out the uneven distribution of health workers in India. Now health worker includes all those people who are engaged primarily to enhance health. As we understand that competent, motivated and committed health workforce forms the core of an effective and efficient health system. Now this unequal distribution of health workforce should also be understood from the backdrop of World Health Report of 2006 as it identified India among the 57 countries which faced critical shortage of health workforce. Now after this report, India made significant development through the National Rural Health Mission and other initiatives. As India through the NRHM or National Rural Health Mission has recruited additional 1,60,000 health workforce. Now this health workforce includes doctors, nurse as well as midwife. Further, the government also recruited roughly around 9 lakh ASHA workers, that is accredited social health activists, to provide as an interface between the communities and the health system. Now, despite the success achieved through National Rural Health Mission in recruiting ASHA workers as well as having a skilled workforce, still availability of these skilled health workforce, including doctors, nurse and midwife, still remains a challenge, especially in the rural and remote parts of the country. Now, the challenges include inadequate numbers of these skilled health workforce, lack of skills among some of them, as well as unequal distribution of these skilled health workforce across the country. So it is in this aspect, this particular data point reflects that how health workers are unevenly distributed in India. Now this topic in your prelims examination gets covered under social sector initiatives as well as social issues, especially with respect to health, and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 2 under issues relating to health. Now this particular table highlights that how health professionals are split across sectors and their density per 10,000 people in India. So the categories of health workers are allopathic doctors, and according to the medical registry it is 7.1, whereas according to the NSSO, that is National Sample Survey Office, it is mere 5.9. Further, in dental practice it is only 1.2 as per the registry, whereas according to NSSO it is 0.7. For Ayush it's 5.7 in the registry, and in the NSSO it's 4. Further, with respect to physiotherapy, diagnostic practice and other practices, it is 0.5 as per the registry, whereas it is 0.7 as per NSSO. With respect to above as well as non-medical staff, it is 38.2 with respect to the registry and 29.1 per 10,000 available as per NSSO. And with respect to doctor, nurse and midwife, It is 26.7 according to the registry and 20.6 per 10,000 as per the NSSO. So this is a distribution as per different sectors like allopathic doctor, dental practice, Ayush, as well as doctor, nurse and midwife. So you can see that there is a discrepancy or there is a mismatch of data with respect to the registry as well as with respect to the data provided by NSSO. Now with respect to skills mismatch, it says that many of the NSSO respondents who claim to be health workers lack the necessary qualifications as well as medical training. So this particular graph which is highlighted shows that density of health professionals came down after adjusting for qualification. Hence, for allopathic doctor, it came down to 4.5. For dental practice, it came down to 0.7. For Ayush, it came down to 3.2. And for nurse and midwife, it came to only 4.2 per 10,000 population. So we understand that lack of medical skills among health workforce is another area of concern which the government must look into. Now the report highlights that most of the eastern states such as Bihar, Orissa and Jharkhand have the lowest density of doctors, nurses and midwives. As this graph highlights the density, and you can see Bihar, Jharkhand, Himachal Pradesh and Orissa including Assam and Madhya Pradesh shows some of the lowest density of health workers in India. Whereas as per the graph, it is highest for Delhi, Kerala and Union Territories. Now another aspect highlighted in this particular report is with respect to urban skew. It says that density of health workers were significantly higher in urban areas as compared to rural areas. So we understand that density of health workforce in urban area is quite high as compared to rural areas. And this stark difference was especially in the case of dentists as 97% of them practice in urban areas. So this particular graph highlights the percentage of health workers in urban area in red color and in rural area in blue color. So you can see that all health workers, it's more in the urban area as compared to the rural area. Whereas with respect to nurse and midwife, they are also more in the urban area as compared to the rural area. Same is the story with Ayush as well as allopathic doctor. But with respect to dental practitioner, as you can see, most of them are in the urban areas. That is close to 97% of the dentists practice in the urban area. So this data highlights the mismatch of health workforce with respect to urban areas as well as rural areas. Now another important aspect to be highlighted is that India has 20.6 health workers per 10,000 people, and this was shown by the National Sample Survey Organization, that is NSSO. However, this number of 20.6 health workers per 10,000 is below the WHO threshold, which is that of 22.8 per 10,000 people. And this number has increased from 19 health workers per 10,000 people in the year 2012. So there has been an increase with respect to number of health workers per 10,000 people. However, the challenges still remains not only with respect to inadequate numbers but also with respect to unequal distribution between rural and urban areas. Another important aspect is with respect to lack of skills. As we saw that after the NSSO survey, most of the number of health workers with respect to allopathic doctor, dental practitioner, Ayush workers as well as nurse and midwife came down significantly after they lacked necessary qualification and medical training. So apart from having the numbers, the government must also focus on providing adequate medical skills to the health workforce including nurse as well as midwife. And as we have already seen that the distribution of health workers is quite uneven between urban and rural areas, as rural areas having 71% of India's population has only 36% of health workers. So this reflects an extremely uneven distribution of health workforce in rural India. Thus, this particular news was specially with respect to the uneven distribution of health workforce, especially in rural area and urban area. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 8. It says Nilgiri tribals tense as trekkers trash priceless rock art. Government has done little to stop illegal tourism from defacing the drawings at Karikiyoor. Now, this news highlights that the rock paintings in Karikiyoor at Keel Kotagiri in the Nilgiri forest of Tamil Nadu, which is 5,000 years old, have been destroyed by trekkers, tourists, and vandals. Now, as you can see in the map, Karikiyoor is in the state of Tamil Nadu. So, this news highlights that close to 40% of the paintings have been destroyed by these tourists, trekkers, and vandals. The members of Irula tribal community of the Nilgiris have an ancestral link to this rock painting site, as this rock painting depicts the hunting habits, ways of life of local communities as well as their ritualistic purposes. Now, from your prelims perspective, this topic gets covered under History of India and your mains gets covered under GS paper 1, especially under Indian culture. Now, the government is not taking any adequate measures to protect these sites. So, in the lack of any government effort, the local communities have planned to put up warning boards to prohibit tourists from entering such sites without permission. And such entrance in those sites must only be with a tourist guide. So, the Archaeological Department, the Archaeological Survey of India, and also the Forest Department must take adequate measures in order to protect such important rock paintings, which depicts hunting habits, ways of life of local communities, as well as ritualistic purposes. So, in this news, you must remember about the Erula tribal community and also about the rock paintings at Karikiyoor at Keel Kotagiri, which is in the state of Tamil Nadu. This news becomes important from your prelims perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. Now, the next news appears on page number 13. It says just 20% water left in 91 major reservoirs. In western region's 27 major reservoirs, it is down to 11% of the total capacity as per the Central Water Commission. In your prelims examination, it gets covered under geography, and your mains, it gets covered under GS paper 1 as well as GS paper 3. So, this news mentions that water storage in reservoirs of most states of West and South India has dipped to less than average of last 10 years as per the Central Water Commission. The commission further says that the water storage available in 91 major reservoirs of the country for the week ending on 30th May 2019 was 31.65 billion cubic meters, and this amount is 20% of total storage capacity of these reservoirs. So we understand that this news highlights water scarcity as only 20% of water is left in 91 major reservoirs. Now, reservoirs are water bodies formed or modified by human activity for specific purposes, and this is done in order to provide a reliable and controllable resource of water. The main uses of these reservoirs include drinking and municipal water supply, industrial and cooling water supply, power generation, agricultural irrigation, river regulation and flood control, commercial and recreational fisheries, boating, as well as other aesthetic recreational uses, navigation, canalization, and waste disposal in certain situations. So, these can be said to be some of the uses of reservoirs. Now, reservoirs are usually found in areas of water scarcity or areas of water excesses, or where there are agricultural or technological reasons to have a controlled water facility. Now, where water is scarce, reservoirs are mainly used to conserve available water for future use with respect to drinking as well as irrigation purposes. Now, where there is excess of water, reservoirs are used for flood control and to prevent downstream areas from being flooded. Now, particular activities such as power generation, fish farming, paddy field management, general wetland formation can also be met by constructing reservoirs. So, these can be said to be some of the purposes of reservoirs. Now, in India, the Central Water Commission monitors water reservoirs in India. Central Water Commission functions under the Ministry of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Regeneration. Now, with respect to Central Water Commission, you must know that it is a premier technical organization of India in the field of water resource, and currently it is functioning as an attached office of the Ministry of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Regeneration. Further, it highlights that the Commission is entrusted with the general responsibilities of initiating, coordinating, and furthering in consultation of the state governments concerned schemes for control, conservation, and utilization of water resources throughout the country. And this is done with the purpose of flood control, irrigation, navigation, drinking water supply, and water power development. Further, the Central Water Commission also undertakes investigations, construction, and execution of any such schemes as may be required by the Government of India. So, this particular news highlights that the Central Water Commission is monitoring live storage of 91 reservoirs of the country on weekly basis, and these 91 reservoirs are divided in 5 regions, namely Northern region, Eastern region, Western region, Central region, and Southern region. And this is done on the basis of the state. So, the Northern region includes state of Himachal Pradesh, Punjab, and Rajasthan. Eastern region includes Jharkhand, Orissa, West Bengal, and Tripura. Western region includes states of Gujarat and Maharashtra, whereas the central region includes UP, Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh. And the southern region includes Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. Now, this topic of water management and water scarcity becomes extremely important. As you can see, questions have been asked by UPSC in the year 2016 as well as in 2015 in GS paper 1. In 2016, the question asked was, the effective management of land and water resources will drastically reduce the human miseries. Explain. The next question asked was, in what way micro watershed development projects help in water conservation in drought prone and semi-arid regions of India? The question asked in the year 2015 was, India is well endowed with fresh water resources. Critically examine why it still suffers from water scarcity. So we understand that this topic of water scarcity becomes an important topic from your mains perspective. Hence, this particular news which highlights water scarcity in 91 major reservoirs in India becomes extremely important. Now, after a discussion, these forms your practice question for the day. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. Now, both these practice questions have been asked in the UPSC prelims of 2015. This question reads, with reference to inflation in India, which of the following statements is correct? Options are, controlling inflation in India is the responsibility of Government of India only. No, the statement is incorrect. B. RBI has no role in controlling the inflation. Absolutely incorrect. C. Decreased money circulation helps in controlling the inflation. Yes, this statement is correct. However, let's read the last statement as well. Increased money circulation helps in controlling inflation. No, this statement is incorrect. So in this, the correct answer is C. Now moving on to the next question, it says, in the index of core industries, which of the following is given the highest weightage? Now we have discussed this particular question. Now we have discussed the weightage of different core industries. In this, the correct answer is B, that is electricity generation. Now these are your practice question number 3 and practice question number 4. What you can do is to take a pause of another 5 seconds. Now this question says, which of the following states or union territories have one of the lowest density of doctors, nurses and midwife? Options are Delhi, Bihar, Jharkhand, Gujarat. In this, the correct answer is Bihar and Jharkhand, whereas Delhi and Gujarat has highest number of density of doctors, nurses and midwife. So in this, the correct answer would be 2 and 3. So here D becomes the correct answer. Now moving on to the fourth question, it says rock paintings at Karikiyoor have been in news recently. Karikiyoor is situated in. In this, the correct answer is B, that is Tamil Nadu. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.